It began with a single injury, but it wasn't just any player who went down. Caitlin Clark, the face of the WNBA, the rookie phenom drawing millions of eyes to every game, was suddenly sidelined. A quad injury, they said. 2 weeks of recovery. They promised. But 2 weeks in the WNBA is not like 2 weeks anywhere else. Those 14 days threatened to unravel years of carefully crafted narratives, sponsorship deals, and illusions of stability. The league wasn't just losing a player. It was watching its financial engine grind to a halt in real time. The shock rippled instantly. One moment, the Indiana Fever were preparing for a high-profile clash with the Washington Mystics. A game so hyped it had been moved to a bigger arena. Tickets were flying, fans lining up, employees hired, promotions launched, all built on the guarantee that Clark would be there. Then, overnight, it all collapsed. Clark's injury changed everything. Ticket sales tanked, resale markets dried up, entire sections of the arena remained empty. What was once billed as a marquee matchup became a chilling glimpse at the WNBA's uncomfortable reality. Fans didn't just lose interest, they walked away. Ticket prices were slashed in half almost immediately, but even desperate discounts couldn't hide the truth. People weren't coming to see a game, they were coming to see Caitlin Clark. Without her, the magic was gone, and no amount of promotional spin could cover it up. The optics were disastrous. What was supposed to be another example of the WNBA's momentum turned into evidence of how dangerously fragile the league's foundation truly was. 2 weeks without Clark had become 2 weeks of brutal exposure. The parallel to Lionel Messi in Major League Soccer was undeniable. When Messi doesn't play, fans riot. Teams acknowledge it, plan for it, and even offer free concessions or tickets to future matches to soften the blow. MLS doesn't pretend. It admits Messi is the attraction, and it builds its business model around that reality. The WNBA, the league has insisted growth is organic, that fans are showing up for collective. But Clark's injury exposed a truth executives refuse to face. This surge isn't shared equally. It rests almost entirely on her shoulders. And that denial is precisely what makes this moment so devastating. The WNBA has spent years trying to convince players, owners, sponsors, and fans that women's basketball is finally blossoming, finally achieving stability, finally spreading its wings beyond individual stars. Yet in one brutal twist of fate, Clark's absence laid bare how fragile the entire system really is. For players banking on long-term gains, the timing could not have been worse. Instead of strengthening their hand for negotiations, her injury pulled the rug out from under them. Suddenly, panic spread through locker rooms everywhere. Because this wasn't just about missing one game or two. It wasn't just about a single team losing its brightest star. This was about the numbers that fueled the league, the ratings, the attendance, the merchandise sales, all on the verge of implosion without Clark. Over the past months, games featuring her drew 1.5 to 2 million viewers, unprecedented numbers in WNBA history. Without her, the league struggled to break 200,000. Some nights barely 400,000 tuned in, even with other all-stars on the court. And everyone knew the next 2 weeks would be the ultimate test of truth. The fear was palpable. Players had spent months preparing for collective bargaining negotiations, planning to demand charter flights, bigger rosters, better housing allowances, and life-changing salary increases. Their leverage was supposed to be undeniable. Record crowds, historic viewership, surging merchandise sales. But all of that leverage evaporated if the data showed that it was Clark, and Clark alone, responsible for the spike. Owners could simply point to 2 weeks of cratering ratings and say, why should we pay millions when the league collapses without one player? The negotiating table was already tilting against them. Behind closed doors, some owners were almost relieved. It sounds cruel, even heartless, but business rarely plays nice. For years, franchises operated at a loss, hemorrhaging money to keep the league afloat. Only recently had some teams started reporting profits, and those profits were tied almost exclusively to Caitlin Clark's arrival. Now, her absence gave owners proof they could wield like a weapon: hard data, cold numbers, and the perfect argument against extravagant raises. In boardrooms, it wasn't panic, it was strategy. Clark's injury had given them the ammunition they desperately needed. That's what makes this story more sinister than it first appears. While players toss and turn at night, fearing the collapse of their long-awaited payday, team executives saw opportunity. They could claim fiscal responsibility, present themselves as guardians of sustainability, and remind everyone how dangerous it is to tie the fate of an entire league to one woman. They could frame themselves as the adults in the room, refusing to hand out blank checks when revenue clearly evaporated without Clark. For players hoping to negotiate from power, it was a devastating reversal. The reliance on Clark isn't just overwhelming, it's unsustainable. Everyone knows injuries happen. Careers end. Stars fade. The nightmare scenario isn't 2 weeks on the sidelines. It's what happens if Caitlin Clark suffers something worse. What happens if she retires early, overseas, or takes an extended break? The league's entire financial model would collapse overnight. This isn't about doomsday speculation. It's cold reality. When one player holds up the whole structure, the risk is catastrophic. Clark's injury didn't just bruise her quad. It exposed the WNBA's Achilles heel for the world to see. What makes this even more dangerous is the absence of alternatives. Yes, the WNBA has stars: Paige Buchers, Angel Reese, Aya Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, but none of them pull numbers like Clark. Paige draws about half her audience. Angel garners attention more for her off-court drama than her on-court dominance. Stewart, Wilson, Ionescu, they're elite players, but the evidence is clear. They don't move ticket sales or TV ratings in the same universe as Clark. Without her, arenas return to half empty, broadcast partners lose leverage, and the supposed momentum vanishes into thin air. This imbalance grants owners enormous negotiating power. When only one player fuels growth, they can argue it makes no sense to give blanket raises to everyone else. Why hand out millions to athletes who aren't moving the financial needle? Why promise luxury accommodations or charter flights when the business case falls apart the moment Clark isn't on the floor? It's brutal, yes, but it's business. Owners can point directly to empty seats and plummeting ratings as undeniable proof. The injury didn't just sideline Clark, it sidelined the bargaining position of every other player in the league. The psychological toll on players is immense. Just weeks ago, many felt they were finally stepping into their rightful place, respected, recognized, celebrated. They believed momentum was theirs, that the league had turned a corner. And then in a flash, Clark's absence reminded them of how fragile it all truly was. Dreams of progress were met with cold reality. Their value, their leverage, their negotiating power, all tied to someone else's health. It was a sobering reminder that for all their talent, for all their fight, they were still operating in Clark's shadow. The financial realities make it even harsher. After decades of bleeding money, many franchises only recently clawed their way to profitability. But those profits weren't spread across the league. They were concentrated around Clark. Owners knew it. Executives knew it. And now everyone else did too. If one player holds a key to profitability, why risk long-term commitments to others? Why gamble on contracts that could sink franchises the moment Clark is gone? To the players, it felt like betrayal. To the owners, it was common sense. The divide between dreams and dollars had never been sharper. And yet, there's a cruel irony buried here. Some argue that Clark's dominance should strengthen the players' case. If one woman is single-handedly carrying the league, doesn't that prove the system is broken? Doesn't that show the need to invest more in developing and marketing other stars? Pay the players more, spread the spotlight, build a foundation that doesn't collapse when one knee buckles. It's a compelling argument, but it's also dangerous, because acknowledging that truth means admitting the current boom isn't sustainable. And owners are far too eager to make that case themselves. The reality is that Clark's peers simply don't generate the same commercial impact. Paige may light up highlight reels, Angel may dominate social feeds, and veterans like Stewart or Wilson may define excellence. But the numbers don't lie. Ticket sales don't surge without Clark. Ratings don't spike without Clark. Merchandise doesn't fly off shelves without Clark. The WNBA has stars, yes, but it doesn't yet have equals. And until it does, Clark's injury gives owners a perfect excuse to argue that massive pay hikes and lavish benefits are not just unreasonable, they're impossible. For players, this timing could not have been worse. This was supposed to be their moment, the historic contract talks that would finally secure what generations before them had only dreamed of. The chance to lock in charter flights, better housing, and real salaries that reflected their worth. Instead, they find themselves cornered, negotiating not from strength, but from weakness. The dream of using record attendance as leverage now risks turning into a nightmare of cold statistics, showing the league is only as valuable as one person. And that is a devastating bargaining chip to lose. The next 2 weeks loom like a trial by fire. Every game without Clark becomes a referendum. Every empty seat, every low rating, every missed sale, more evident for owners to bring to the table. It's as if the league is on display, stripped of its biggest star, forced to reveal its true value. And everyone knows the numbers will be ugly. That's why players are panicking. Not just because Clark is hurt, but because the brutal reality is about to be laid bare for all to see. No more spin, no more narratives, just truth. Even more complex is the fact that Clark herself isn't directly losing money here. She's locked into her rookie contract, making a fraction of what she's worth. The players most at risk are her peers, who are counting on her rise to fuel their own payday. Without Clark, their demands crumble. Without Clark, their leverage evaporates. And so, the cruel twist emerges. Clark's injury may hurt others financially more than it hurts her. While she remains bound by low wages, everyone else was hoping to cash in on the boom she created. That contradiction fuels deeper resentment. Why should one woman's shoulders bear the weight of an entire league? Why should her body, her health, her every move decide the futures of hundreds of other athletes? It's unfair, yes, but it's also reality. And the league has done little to change it. Instead, they've leaned into her popularity, milked every highlight, every appearance, every soundbite. They built their empire on her back, and now they face the consequences of that decision. If she falters, everything falters. The system wasn't designed to survive without Caitlin Clark. This raises the biggest, most haunting question of all. Can the WNBA ever truly become a multi-star league? Or will it always rely on one transcendent figure to keep the lights on? History doesn't paint a hopeful picture. From Lisa Leslie to Diana Taurasi to Sue Bird to now Caitlin Clark, the league has always revolved around singular icons. But never before has one player's shadow loomed this large, this quickly. The next 2 weeks won't just test the WNBA's financial resilience. They'll test whether women's basketball can sustain itself beyond one unstoppable name. The timing makes it a nightmare scenario. Just as negotiations reached their most critical stage, just as the players felt closest to their breakthrough, Clark's injury stripped away their advantage. Now, instead of fighting for historic change, they may be forced to accept scraps. The chance to rewrite their futures could become the moment they realize how little leverage they actually hold. For athletes who believe they were on the brink of transformation, it is devastating. For owners who fear being forced into concessions, it is strategic salvation. The stakes could not be higher. Every day that Clark remains out is another day of reckoning, another empty seat, another low rating, another nail in the coffin of bargaining power. This isn't just about a quad injury anymore. It's about the financial soul of the WNBA. The league stands at a crossroads, with players desperate for progress and owners eager to tighten their grip. What began as a 2-week injury has escalated into a full-blown crisis. And when the dust settles, one truth will remain clear. The WNBA's greatest strength is also its greatest vulnerability. Caitlin Clark herself